G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Paul Roos, who's the founder and director at Performance by Design. And Paul these days is based in Hawaii. So thanks for your time, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to this chat, one, because I'm a sports nut and your background is in sport and AFL particularly, but also how sport impacts and interacts with business. So, and today we're going to be chatting about the importance of leadership to a business. So, Paul, I reached out to you, I was probably before Christmas, and on LinkedIn, and you were good enough to spare half an hour with me today and talk about this topic. So maybe just to kick things off, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your experience on this topic, mate.
Yeah, so I started at Fitzroy back in 1980 when it was zoning. So just Don Vale, and I went to Fitzroy and played there for 13 years. Probably the main thing I learned from a leadership point of view was how much impact the leaders of the team had. Obviously, we had some great coaches, you know, Wolsey and David Park and et cetera, et cetera. But really, the people that shaped the culture were Gary Wilson, Bernie Quinlan, Laurie Serafini, Mickey Conlon. Yeah, what time they turn up to training, you know, what did they wear, you know, what do they do on the weekends, you know, all that sort of stuff. So I started to think more about leadership probably when I took over as captain, that, you know, first and foremost, you have to be a good role model to be a leader. People ask me all the time, is it a learned skill or was you born with it? And it's probably a combination. You can definitely learn leadership. Then I retired in 1998 and I wrote down, it turned out to be 25 points, the things I liked about my leaders and things I didn't like about my leaders. Now, bearing in mind when I first started, we were part-time. You know, when I finished at Sydney for 4 years, I was a full-time footballer. So there was this changing time in leadership. And I'm really glad I wrote down the notes, because now at Performance by Design, we challenge leaders. And with the way we talk about, are you the leader you wish you had? It's a really different way to look at leadership. Are you the leader you wish you had? And that's really the foundation for what I wrote down. And then went to Sydney, started as coach. And I really wanted to change the dynamics and get players more involved in the culture of their footy club. So we went to Coffs Harbour. We came up with a set of Bloods behaviours. We picked our leadership group based on the behaviours, which was the first time that it ever happened. And then Stewie Maxfield became captain. And then we won the premiership in 2005. So there's a sort of quick synopsis of, you know, the leadership journey that I've been on and how much it's changed in AFL football over the period of time I've been involved.
You mentioned at the Bloods, or the Sydney Swans as they are now, and you mentioned sort of around the values that you sort of introduced into the team. Is that right?
Yeah, so really they did themselves. All we did was say, what do you want to stand for? You know, what do you think other teams, and this is the workshops we do with all companies. Most companies have a purpose or values, but don't really have behaviors, and they don't live them and breathe them. You know, they have them up on the wall and they just become something people look at but don't really action because they don't systemize it. So we systemize it. You know, I talk about taking the chance out of culture. You know, if you're a company of sort of 5 to 30 people or whatever, you can get a good group of people. Yeah, and most of the time you're going to have a reasonable culture. But that wasn't going to be acceptable for me at Sydney. Yeah, I wanted to define who we were, define our culture, and have a really clear set of behaviours. And I talk about it. Then you can act, if you know exactly who you are, what you stand for, and what your behaviours are, then you have an opportunity to act your way into the system, or you can act your way out of the system. And that really was the system we started at Sydney. And John Longmire, who was my assistant coach at the time, was with me at Coffs Harbour, has continued that a great tradition of great leaders and great culture and great behaviours.
Yeah. Is it true that one of the values was the no dickhead policy?
Well, it was sort of an unwritten, I think that was Rick Barra, who as a recruiting guy made a mention of that. We have a no dickheads policy. But what we did, we had a roadmap to be successful and to act in. Yeah, equally, we had a roadmap if you wanted to be a dickhead, we didn't last too long, sort of thing. So that's sort of how that manifested itself. And people largely refer to the Bloods and Sydney as the no dickheads policy. Even I think the All Blacks, there was a book called Legacy, and the All Blacks visited us actually. And they learned that but we spoke about it in those terms, and then they adopted the same principles.
Yeah. And I guess sort of someone for following AFL, and you can see, and this is all about, I guess, the values, isn't it? That it's embedded in the club and it has been for many years now. And you can see that there's sort of no deviation. And I guess that'd be one of the important things I'd take.
Yeah, look, in a system, for those that don't follow the AFL closely, the system is draft and salary cap. So the whole system is built around you not being at the top of the ladder for X amount of years. And if you look at the two teams that have been most consistent, it's Geelong and Sydney. Sydney started the revolution, the leadership and culture revolution, and then Jared Murphy went to Geelong and did it with Bomber Thompson. So the first two teams that started it are still the most successful teams. I think both teams have played in 20 of the last 23 finals or 20 of the last 22 and won multiple premierships. So it is possible. If you stick to them and you put a process in place and you're really clear on who you are and what you want to stand for, it's absolutely possible. I talk about behavioural-based teams. So you can become a behavioural-based teams or a talent-based team. Now, talent-based teams can win. I've never suggested they can't. But as soon as that talent leaves, they go to the bottom of the ladder. Behavioural-based teams don't drop to the bottom of the ladder. They have an ability to educate quickly, teach quickly, induct quickly. Young players come in, know exactly what's expected, and they rise back up quickly. Our Sydney Swans and the Geelong Footy Club. Talent-based teams purely and simply rely on talent and don't really worry about behaviours.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So for small businesses and the owners that are listening, you mentioned that from a leadership perspective, it sort of can be trained and coached. So what are some things that you can sort of talk about that can help business owners in that regard?
Yeah, I think small business owners too often kick the can down the road in culture, and we know why, because there's a lot to do as a small business owner, whether that's the functions of the business, as in the paperwork and all those sorts of things, or you've got to do multiple roles. But I honestly believe the sooner they define their culture, the better. And it's as simple as, what we do at Performance by Design is get everyone in the room and ask the question, what behaviours are we seeing that are counterproductive? What do we want to see? Who are we? What's our purpose? What are our values? All those sort of questions. And then we really define it. And once you define it, it really is life-changing or business-changing, because suddenly we have a roadmap for all the conversations that we're going to have should be built around what we call our culture code. We also do some profiling, so you understand yourself, you understand your team. How do I communicate? How do I get the best? We start building relationships. We have a relationship building exercise, and we teach people how to have what we call real talk, honest conversations. And then we systemize it along with the business, depending on where it's at. So the sooner you do it, my advice to businesses, the sooner you do it, the better you're going to be and the less problems you're going to have in your journey to becoming a bigger organisation.
Yeah, that's great. And we totally agree at Grow Small Business, and a lot of our programs are built around people and those aspects you talk about. I'm interested in the culture code that you touched on. It's a big part of Performance by Design. Can you just sort of give us a bit of an insight into that?
Yeah, again, we find a lot of companies have a purpose and values, but it sort of just sticks on the wall, and they don't really. But there's a difference. So what we try and do is get underneath that. We want to define that for small business purpose, values, but also what are the behaviours? If your values are honesty, supportive, and passionate, that can be slightly ambiguous. Honesty to you can be slightly different to me. But if we break the values down into what behaviours do we want to see to take this business forward, and we start to workshop those behaviours. Behaviours is an action. It's something you can see someone do. Tell the truth is a behaviour. Honesty is a value. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So, you weren't honest. Oh, hang on. I was honest, Ruzi. No, you weren't. I asked you where that meeting was on, and you said it wasn't. I said, yeah, but you didn't have to be at the meeting. Whereas tell the truth is pretty black and white. So we're trying to define our culture code through clear behaviours. And then once we set those behaviours, we start to have conversations around those behaviours. Did you deliver on your word? Did you tell the truth? Did you ask questions? Did you help? Did you support your teammate by offering advice? Whatever it is, because everyone's culture code is different. Yeah. But the key is you define it yourselves. Performance by Design just moderates, but it has to be your culture code. And that's why we love working with small businesses, because if we can get everyone in a room, or we start with the exec team and then we bring it down, then everyone has a chance to opt in or opt out. And then in the induction process, we go through those behaviours. Okay, here are the behaviours of our organisation. What do you think? Yep, love it. Oh, I'm not too sure about that. Well, maybe you don't fit the organisation. Again, we're getting everyone to buy in, and then we have conversations constantly and a system around our behaviours.
Yeah, that's great. I was certainly coaching and working with businesses. It's certainly and those that haven't defined their purpose and values, they certainly find it challenging and confronting sometimes. And to your point, more often than not, there's fallout, isn't there, from actually defining it and living it and the behaviours every day. You're either in or you're out as a sort of a team member.
We just did some work with a big Australian company, and the feedback, as you said, for the first time, they've been able to have what they thought previously were going to be difficult conversations. So the feedback we got was, guys, the last month's been amazing. We've just referred to our culture code, and what would have been a real problem a month, 2 months, 3 months ago has become a way easier conversation because we just go back to it. So no one wants to go to work and cause trouble. No one wants to, alarm goes off in the morning and go, I'm going to have a really bad day today and I'm going to make sure everyone else at the office. Yeah. But we just don't know. If we don't define it, and that's what football clubs do really well, really clearly define, sorry, not all, but the better ones really define their culture code, define their behaviours, and they don't accept anything else. They educate, they support. If someone falls out, this is the way we do it. But once, if you continually act out of that, then you're gone, basically.
Yeah, it's a good point because it's all very well to have purpose, values, and obviously prescriptive around the behaviours, but it's a two-way street, isn't it? You've got to support your team, but equally they've got to come to the table and support themselves at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's a balance. I talk about leadership. Leadership's not easy. If anyone listening to this call thinks I'm going to give you sprinkle some magic dust on you, it's not. It's not easy because it's a constant juggle between standards and relationships. Standards and relationships. Have we dropped our standards? Have we dropped our relationships? Because if we've got really strong relationships at work, then we can have conversations. But I think the other thing leaders need to understand is give positive feedback. There's some really good data out of Harvard, I think it is. I think it's anywhere from 4 to 7 to 1, positive to negative feedback. And that's as little as, thanks, Michael, thanks very much for being so diligent, on the call or at workplace, or thanks for giving me a chop out yesterday. Little and often conversations, positive feedback. But as leaders, we think we've got to wait for the 3 months, 6 months review. And then we've got to go, oh, geez, everyone gets up nervous. And then, I've got a list of things you got to do better. And then you go, hang on, why didn't you tell me that 3 months ago? I've stopped doing that. Little and often conversations, largely positive. And then when we get to a point where, that was a bit rude yesterday, I didn't really like the way you spoke to me. Oh, gee, I didn't really think about it. Thanks, Paul. That's really good feedback. I appreciate it. But we have to have constant communication. But if we don't understand who we are and what we want to be, it's really hard to have that constant conversation and honest feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, the relationships and building relationships is so important. And so in that, how important is trust and building trust in those relationships?
It's funny because since I've left Melbourne Footy Club and worked in, everyone thinks of trust as a nice to have. You should think of trust as an action. You think about this as a really good exercise. Think about doing work with someone you trust. What's the conversation like? How long does it take? And what's the outcome? All right. Think about someone you don't trust. What's the conversation like? How long does it take? And what's the outcome? Dramatically different. But trust has gone action. All right. Trust. And I remember, obviously, when I started coaching Melbourne, I got the job because they trusted me and I knew what I was doing. But I still had to build trust through my actions. Trust is not a nice to have. Trust is actions. When we talk about the trust bucket, you put money, you put water in the trust bucket or money in the trust bank and you withdraw it. Is your trust bank full? Is it half empty? Or have you got nothing in your trust bank? And that's purely and simply through actions. And that's leaders as well. That's just as bottom up. That's top down, right? We need to think about trust as not a nice to have, but an economic driver. The teams and companies that build trust have way more success.
Yeah, and So it's just not a word, it's sort of the actions, like a lot of things, lead the outcomes.
Yeah, and then you think about who, and the other way to look at it is, who do you trust the most? All right, and what are the actions? And you can actually write them down. Yeah, I trust, my wife the most because she tells me the truth. She delivers on her word. She's always supporting me. So all of a sudden you can put an action behind the trust. Who don't I trust? Oh, okay. Well, they lie to me. They never get back to me. They only ring me when they want something. Okay, so we can start to visualize what trust looks like. Okay, and then we can start to build it through our culture code.
Are you a small business owner? You know that getting recruitment right can make or break your team's success. Just one mishire can cost your business up to 27 times their salary. Finding and retaining top talent is a challenge, especially in today's competitive market. That's where our Ultimate Recruitment Toolkit comes in. Over 10 intensive days, our online course is designed specifically for small business owners like you. We'll walk you through the process of sourcing and securing A players for your team. Here's what you'll gain. Learn the proven strategies to pinpoint and attract the best talent in your industry. Access our comprehensive playbook filled with templates and tools tailored to fit your business needs, and apply the resources right away to enhance your recruitment process and streamline hiring. Invest in your business's success by helping your management team become effective recruiters. Supercharge your hiring process today with the Ultimate Recruitment Toolkit, available at growasmallbusiness.com.
So trust and relationships, they sort of interrelate then, would that be fair to say?
100%. I think and this is the thing, the more we build relationships, and this is hard again for leaders, but get out of your office. When I went to Melbourne, I said to my assistant coaches who all come from Sydney, I was lucky when I coached Sydney because I already had relationships with players. When I went to Melbourne, I didn't. I said, we have to build really strong relationships because we're going to, they're a 2-win team. Yeah, we're going to have some really honest conversations. So through that first 3 or 4 months, that's really our main goal, was to build relationships with the players so we could have honest conversations. And they knew we were in it with them. It wasn't us versus them. It was collectively, we're going to build this thing together. But it has to be built through relationship building, and you build good relationships through actions.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. You need to sort of, get out of your office. And I think in the business context, that happens way too often with leaders, business owners. They sit in their office and close it because they need to spend time focused, which is fair enough. It's all, you to have that time. But yeah, get out and talk to people and get around your team. Is certainly something I encourage and can be very impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I heard of a story. I know a kid who went to an AFL footy club, and he told me this story. I knew him, and he said, I won't tell you the club because he'll give the coach away. He said he was there for a full 12 months, and the coach didn't speak to him once. And I said, I don't know how that is possible, and B, that coach is a poor leader. Yeah, 100% a poor leader. And that coach will do well with a really talented base team. But that coach has no idea how to build standards, relationships, all those sorts of things. Did not speak to him once in 12 months, which was, to me, was just, to your point, we know how difficult it is to be a leader. But one of your main roles is to connect with your staff, and to work out a way how we can all do this collectively together. Pretty hard to do if you don't speak to anyone.
Exactly. You'd say impossible, right? What about the concept of vulnerability, and as a leader displaying vulnerability? How does that impact on leadership?
It's funny, again, having been out of sport, I think some of the terms, and the English language sometimes doesn't do justice to what we're actually saying, because I know Brene Brown talks a lot about psychological safety and vulnerability and all that sort of stuff. Sometimes the words can be a bit confusing and also challenging. I don't like the term psychological safety. Safety, we want to create a safe environment. What's vulnerability? Be yourself, really. I said to you, you got to be vulnerable as opposed to just be yourself. That's a lot easier to do. And that, to me, is what vulnerability is. Go to work, be yourself. That's what people want to see. So if you're sad, explain to people I'm sad. This is what happened to me yesterday. It's amazing in a workplace how many people will help you as a leader if you're honest with them and turn up every day as your true self. And that's, to me, that's what vulnerability is. Be yourself. Now, you've obviously got to be certain characters within a leader, but you want people to know who you are. We do an exercise around that, which is really a relationship building exercise, which is around, if you want to use the term vulnerability, which is around being vulnerable. Telling people who you are, not just who you barracked for on the weekend and did Collingwood win the premiership and we beat Carlton and, is Tassie going to get a team? And, they're good ways to build relationships at a workplace. But I really want to know what's beneath the bonnet. How's mum and dad? What do your kids do? Where'd you work before you came here? So it's amazing when we do these exercises, how little people know about each other in the workplace. And as soon as we do an exercise around vulnerability or relationship building, text messages get sent afterwards. People ring up, send emails. I wish I knew that. I apologize for that. I shouldn't have done that. How can I help you to do that? It's absolutely imperative to be a really authentic leader.
Yeah, I like that. Be yourself. It's certainly, for me, I totally agree. Vulnerability, I don't necessarily like the word, so I like that. Be yourself. I came across years ago the concept of 3 H's, which Richmond Football Club introduced, as I understand, which I think comes to your point about understanding your team members, in that the 3 H's were talking about a hero in your life, a hardship in your life, and a highlight in your life. Is that sort of a similar process that you go through?
I think that came from actually Performance by Design. Jared Murphy was there for a
Is that
while.
right?
So he actually, prior to us starting the business, so I think that actually came from Jared.
Right.
Which is great, which is fantastic. Because you start to open up to your teammates and you start to understand your teammates and you start to, because they spend a lot of time. You spend a lot of time at your workplace and you spend a lot of time with people there. So the more you know them, the more you want to go into battle. You want to help them. You want to, support them when they're going through some tough times. So those exercises are incredibly valuable.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, and particularly the hardship piece, I think it does give sometimes a lot more context to maybe how a person acts or does things, and I've certainly found it useful going through some of those aspects with either businesses or myself, or we actually did it at the cricket team I'm involved with. So it can make a big difference, and I've seen it. So it's certainly
100%. If you know someone's journey and you start to feel part of it, particularly the hardship piece, because on the surface, we all want to talk about the things we do really well, or sometimes we don't even do that. But it is hard to share those, difficulties. So when we do that, people feel like they're more connected to you and you feel like you're more authentic and you don't have this facade around you. Oh, gee, Brucey went through that. I didn't know that. That was interesting. Or Michael went through that. Wow. Suddenly opening up to each other and we're learning more about each other. And then when we're going on a journey together, we feel more connected.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Reece, we could talk all day on this, or at least I can, and no doubt you can, because you're very passionate about this stuff. And but just to wrap up, what's one thing our listeners can do tomorrow that can sort of, one step towards improving the leadership in their business?
One thing I really like is ask the newest person that comes in what your culture is like. Okay, so now if they're not prepared to say it, what does that tell you? There's not a safe workplace, so you've got a problem. If they are, because the newest person, what do? I say this, what's the newest person going to do? They don't really care what's written on the wall. At the end of the first week, they're trying to act their way in. Very few people come in and change an organisation straight away. Okay, so what they do is they walk in. Do people turn up to meetings on time? Do people get back to me on email? Do they ring me back? Are they courteous? Do they say hello? Do they ask me about my weekend? So it's a really good way to judge your culture. So ask the newest person. Describe our culture in 3 words. And if they're humming and ahhing and finding it hard, then A, you got a problem because you haven't got a safe workplace. Okay. And B, you need to do something about that. And then you might need to push them a bit on what those 3 words are. Now, if the 3 words are vastly different to what you want them to be, again, you have a problem. But it's just a good way to keep auditing your system. I mean, I would recommend always getting external facilitators to come in and run your culture. People ask me all the time, would you coach again? And I wouldn't, but I would never, ever coach without an external facilitator, because it's very hard when you're inside the culture to understand. It's like watching your kids grow. Rosie Dillon's got bigger. You see them every day. You don't really see the changes in your kids. It's the same with your culture. When an external person comes in, often they'll tell you you've done a lot better job than what you think. But there's also times when they go, we're not having honest conversation. Oh, what do you mean we're not? Well, hang on. We're beating around the bush. So that would be my other recommendation. Get an external facilitator, get someone in to build your culture. But firstly, ask the newest person, what is your culture of your organisation? Most people don't really understand what leadership is and what culture is.
Yeah. Two good tips there, mate. And particularly, I guess, like you say, it's getting external facilitators in, but coaches like yourself or Grow Small Business, because that's what obviously we're all about, and can give you a lot better perspective a lot of the time.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah. So, mate, I really appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation. I'm sure our listeners and small business owners will get a heap out of it. Take care and have a good year.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
We'd greatly appreciate you taking a couple of minutes to leave our podcast a review on iTunes. If you don't have an account, simply follow us on Spotify. You'll help other small business owners find the cast and valuable content our guests share.